Imagine a world on the brink of collapse, a crucible of war, inflation, and clashing ideas. Out of this turmoil emerged a thinker whose defense of liberty would echo through the century. This is the story of Friedrich Hayek, the champion of spontaneous order. Friedrich August von Hayek was born on May 8, 1899, in Vienna, the glittering capital of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. This was a city buzzing with intellectual energy, the home of Sigmund Freud, Gustav Klimt, and Ludwig Boltzmann. It was a world of breathtaking innovation, but also one shadowed by social tension and rising nationalism, a prelude to the storm that was coming. Hayek's family was at the heart of this scholarly world. His father was a physician and botanist, and his mother's family was connected to prominent economists. From a young age, his home was filled with discussions on science, philosophy, and society. He was even a cousin of the great philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein. This environment ignited a powerful curiosity in him, a desire to understand how the world and the societies within it truly worked. Then, the world changed forever. In 1917, Hayek enlisted in the army and served on the Italian front during the First World War. The carnage and chaos he witnessed left a permanent mark, instilling in him a deep skepticism of grand plans and centralized authority. When he returned home, the Austro-Hungarian Empire had vanished, and his beloved Vienna was crippled by hyperinflation and political chaos. Watching people's life savings turn to worthless paper convinced him that economic stability depended on sound money and the freedom of individuals to make their own choices. He threw himself into his studies, earning doctorates in both law and political science from the University of Vienna. A brief period studying in New York exposed him to a more data-driven approach to economics, which perfectly complemented the theoretical tradition he'd learned in Vienna. This blend of experience and education solidified a core belief. Economies are not machines that governments can simply engineer. They are complex, living systems that grow and adapt on their own. Hayek's intellectual journey was shaped by some of the greatest minds of his time. His most important mentor was Ludwig von Mises, a giant of the Austrian School of Economics. Mises, in his groundbreaking book Socialism, argued that a centrally planned economy could never work because it lacked the one thing essential for rational decision-making: real prices. Prices, Mises taught, are not just numbers. They're signals, carrying vast amounts of information about scarcity and demand that no central planner could ever hope to gather. Through Mises's legendary private seminars, Hayek delved deep into the Austrian tradition, built on the foundations laid by thinkers like Karl Menger and Eugene von Behn. They emphasized that value is subjective. Something is only as valuable as an individual thinks it is, and that all economic phenomena begin with the choices of individuals. Hayek and Mises took these ideas and used them to challenge government intervention and the dangers of printing money to solve economic problems. But the world of economics was a battlefield of ideas. Hayek's most famous intellectual rival was John Maynard Keynes. While Hayek warned against government meddling, Keynes argued that governments had a duty to manage demand to fight unemployment. Their fierce debates at the London School of Economics in the 1930s became legendary. A clash of two fundamentally different visions for society. Other thinkers also left their mark. Joseph Schumpeter, another Austrian, introduced the powerful concept of creative destruction. The idea that new innovations constantly destroy old industries, driving progress forward. Although they agreed on the dynamic nature of capitalism, they often disagreed on the role of government. Hayek also engaged with the arguments of socialist planners like Oskar Lange, systematically dissecting their models and exposing their fatal flaws. It was in this intellectual fire of Vienna, London, and New York that Hayek forged his powerful defense of the free market, not as a system of greed, but as a breathtakingly complex information network. In the 1930s, Hayek moved to the London School of Economics, where his ideas on money and the business cycle initially gained traction. He argued that artificially low interest rates, pushed down by central banks, send false signals to entrepreneurs. This leads to malinvestment investing in projects that aren't truly sustainable. The inevitable result is a boom followed by a painful bust. His book, Prices and Production, laid out this theory, offering a powerful alternative to the emerging Keynesian consensus. He saw the Great Depression not as a failure of capitalism, but as the predictable consequence of the credit expansion of the 1920s. For a time, Hayek was seen as the primary intellectual opponent to Keynes. However, as the Depression deepened, Keynes's simpler message of government spending to stimulate demand won the day. It offered a seemingly quick fix, while Hayek's prescription of allowing the market to correct itself seemed harsh and slow. By the late 1930s, Hayek's business cycle theory had been largely eclipsed, and he began to feel his influence in pure economics waning. This perceived failure, however, was a blessing in disguise. It pushed Hayek to pivot from technical economics to the broader questions of political and social philosophy that had always fascinated him. He became increasingly alarmed by the rise of totalitarianism in Europe, Nazism in Germany, and communism in the Soviet Union. He saw a disturbing connection between the economic planning advocated by socialists and the loss of individual freedom under these regimes. This concern culminated in his most famous and controversial work, The Road to Serfdom, published in 1944. His argument was as simple as it was explosive. Any attempt to centrally plan an economy, even with the best intentions, would inevitably lead down a path to tyranny. To control economic life, the state would have to control every aspect of individual life: what jobs people take, what goods they consume, and even what ideas they are allowed to express. The book was an international sensation. It was a direct challenge to the wartime consensus that favored government planning and a rallying cry for defenders of classical liberalism. While critics accused him of being an alarmist, for millions of readers, The Road to Serfdom was a stark and timely warning about the dangers of surrendering liberty for the promise of security. It transformed Hayek from an academic economist into a global public intellectual. After the war, Hayek continued to build on these themes. He moved to the University of Chicago and later to the University of Freiburg. He was troubled that the principles of classical liberalism were being forgotten. So in 1947, he gathered a group of like-minded scholars, including Milton Friedman and Karl Popper at a Swiss mountain resort called Mont Pelerin. This was the founding of the Mont Pelerin Society, an international organization dedicated to defending and promoting the values of a free society. It became an intellectual incubator for the free market revival that would sweep the globe decades later. During this period, Hayek produced some of his most profound work. In his 1960 masterpiece, The Constitution of Liberty, he laid out a comprehensive vision for a free society. He distinguished between liberty, the freedom from coercion by others and other concepts, like political freedom or freedom from want. True liberty, he argued, requires the rule of law. General, abstract rules that apply equally to everyone, allowing individuals to plan their own lives with predictability and security. He argued that the role of government was not to direct people, but to act as an impartial umpire, enforcing the rules of the game. He also delved deeper into his idea of spontaneous order. He argued that many of the most important human institutions, language, law, money, and the market itself, were not the product of conscious design. They emerged organically from the actions of countless individuals, each pursuing their own goals. He used the term cosmos for these self-generating orders and taxis for man-made organizations. The fatal error of planners, he believed, was treating society like a taxis that could be engineered rather than a cosmos that must be allowed to evolve. This insight, drawing from biology and systems theory, was a revolutionary way of understanding social complexity. For many years, Hayek's ideas were considered outside the mainstream. The post-war era was dominated by Keynesian economics and the expansion of the welfare state. But by the 1970s, the tide began to turn. Western economies were plagued by stagflation, a toxic mix of high inflation and high unemployment that Keynesian theory could unexplain. Suddenly, Hayek's warnings about the dangers of inflation and his theories on the business cycle seemed incredibly relevant. In 1974, in a move that shocked the academic world, Hayek was awarded the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Sciences. It was a vindication of his life's work. The Nobel Committee specifically cited his pioneering work on the business cycle and his profound analysis of how the price system functions as an information-sharing mechanism.
The award signaled a major shift in economic thought and brought Hayek's ideas to a new generation. His influence grew exponentially.
Leaders like Margaret Thatcher in the UK and Ronald Reagan in the US drew heavily on his ideas. Thatcher famously slammed a copy of the Constitution of Liberty on a table during a policy meeting, declaring, "This is what we believe." Hayek's defense of free markets, limited government, and individual liberty provided the intellectual firepower for the political and economic revolutions of the 1980s. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 and the subsequent collapse of communism in Eastern Europe were seen by many as the ultimate confirmation of his central thesis in The Road to Serfdom. In his later years, Hayek continued to refine his ideas, publishing Law, Legislation, and Liberty, a 3-volume extension of the Constitution of Liberty. He passed away on March 23, 1992. Having witnessed the dramatic intellectual and political shifts he had helped set in motion. Friedrich Hayek's legacy is immense and complex. He was a thinker who dared to stand against the intellectual currents of his time. He championed the power of individual choice and the wisdom of decentralized knowledge against the arrogance of central planners. His work reminds us that a free and prosperous society is not a gift of government, but the result of spontaneous order, protected by the rule of law. He taught us to be humble about what we can know and control, and to have faith in the creative power of free people. His ideas continue to challenge and inspire us, urging us to defend the foundations of liberty for generations to come. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this exploration of Hayek's life and ideas interesting, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next video. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time!